Hey guys, what's going on? It's Preston here from the Legendarium. Welcome to episode number 6 of 30-minute author interviews. Here at the Legendarium, we're shining a light on indie publishing. Not only do we hope to interview your favorite author, but we hope you find a new favorite author through this podcast. This week, our guest is Chaney. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy 30 Minutes with Chaney. Well, welcome everybody to this episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Our guest today is Chaney. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing pretty good. How have you been doing?
Fantastic.
That is awesome. For those that might not know who you are or don't know much about you, why don't you give them a quick little bio of who you are and what you do?
Well, as you said, I am Chaney. I am a science fiction writer, primarily young adult and dystopian. I live in Florida. I was in the military up until recently, the Air Force, and I got out and decided that I wanted to pursue writing because it was something that I had wanted to do for years and years. And so far it's been great. I've got 3 books out, 2 in my Variant series, another is a standalone, and I'm really enjoying it. I love the community that I've encountered, like in BOD. I went to UtopiaCon recently, met a lot of cool people there, and it's just been really amazing. I'm really thankful for it.
That is awesome. Well, thank you for your service that you did. I guess first of all, thanks to all the servicemen and women out there. So you said you went to UtopiaCon. How was that? Because I wanted to go but wasn't able to go, so I'm hoping maybe next year. How was that experience all around?
It was cool. I met a lot of people that I had previously already sort of established online relationships with, so never met them in person. I met some of my readers. That was really cool. A lot of people from BOD. It was just really nice to meet them in person, you see their pictures, but it's always different when you see that, picture moving in front of you and brings like character and life to that person. And I guess you get closer that way, and now I talk to some of those people more. So it's really nice.
Awesome. I'm hoping I can go next year, but we'll see. What made you decide to write mainly in the young adult genre?
Well, I got into writing because I got into reading like everybody else. And the reason that I got into reading was because somebody handed me a book when I was 18 years old, because my high school and middle school were garbage and we never read anything. So, Florida education system. So I get to college, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was leaning towards the FBI and criminal justice and stuff like that for whatever reason. I don't know. And then I took an English class, and my professor was like, "Oh, you should read Ender's Game, and you should read all these other books." And I went out and I got them all. I spent like $100 because I was really into this class and I was really fascinated by the lectures and everything. And I'd read books before, like I'd read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as a kid, but that was really about it. And when I got to this class, I went out and I bought all these books, and out of all of them, Ender's Game really stuck out to me as like the most interesting one. So I sat down and I read it, and I was just completely absorbed by it. I couldn't put it down. I read it in like a couple days, like 3 or 4 days, and immediately afterwards, I dwelled on the story and the characters for weeks on end, and I couldn't get it out of my head. After that, I thought to myself, I can't believe that words on a page stirred emotion in me, and I was like, I want to do that for somebody else. I started writing fan fiction on the internet, and I'd kind of done that a little bit in high school too, but I started doing it more, and it slowly took on a life of its own, and I started writing like my own stories that weren't really based on anything. And then about my second year in college, I was like, I think I want to be a writer. And and I talked to a lot of people. I talked to my mom, and they were like, yeah, you should just go for it. Follow your dream, do that. So I did, and I got my bachelor's degree in creative writing. And while I was in the military, I went and got a master's degree, and I guess haven't looked back. So no regrets. Even though I've never been able to get like a 9-to-5 job with those degrees, it prepared me to do what I'm doing now. And I write full time, and I do this now for a living. It's not something I do on the side anymore, and it's not like this far off dream that I have. It's something that actually exists in my life, and it's most of my days is just doing that, and it's amazing. It doesn't even feel like work.
Right. That's what they say, when you do something you love, it doesn't feel like work. So you said Ender's Game is one that really inspired you. So the dreaded question, because I've never read the book, which one did you like better, the book or the movie?
Oh my God. I mean, if we get into that, it's going to be a whole conversation. Definitely the book, because there's a whole side story in the book that takes up probably about 20% of it or more, just about his sister and his brother. That's not in the movie at all. And for me, and I think most readers who enjoyed the book, that's a big part of it. And the ending is drastically different. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense why they change things for movies. I think anybody who really is understanding, and they know how movies are made, and the differences between a visual art form and something you read, and you form the story in your head. There's obvious reasons why they have to be different. And when you're reading a book, especially something like Ender's Game, which is written in deep third, you're seeing all this through the character's perspective, and you're getting his inner thoughts and his troubles and his concerns and his fears and all these emotions, and you're living the story through his eyes or hers, like the case of the Hunger Games. But when you watch the movie, you don't get any of that. You get the facial expressions. You get, maybe you'll get some cheap voiceover, in an attempt to mimic the book. Which was the case in The Great Gatsby at the beginning. They changed the beginning of the story to have that open voiceover narrative to mimic the book. So, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think in the case of Ender's Game, if you've read the book, the changes they made, while they make sense on paper, didn't necessarily bring the points of the book home. And I'm sure there's people that'll disagree with me on that. But to answer your question, I wholeheartedly favor the book in every sense.
Yeah. I think that's how it is with most, books that are brought to movies. I think the only one that was maybe the closest, truest to the book that I can remember is The Martian. I thought that was... I know they changed a little bit of the book for the movie, but for the most part, I think they nailed that one pretty good.
Yeah, that one in particular, I think it had, there were some changes here and there, but for the most part, yeah, it was pretty close.
Yeah. So I actually discovered you a little bit through the BOD you mentioned. For those that don't know, it's Band of Dystopian Authors and Fans. It's a great group on Facebook to meet authors and fans of dystopian books. But I really got interested in your writing because of an article that you wrote for Sarah Noffke's website called The Importance of Detail in Young Adult Sci-Fi. What was it that inspired you to write that article?
Once I picked up Ender's Game and I started reading that, I moved on to other young adult sci-fi, and I sort of hung around in that subgenre of sci-fi for a long time, and eventually I moved on to stuff like The Martian and books that are more hard sci-fi, like Stranger in a Strange Land, things like that. But I guess my heart has always been in young adult sci-fi, And I really appreciated stuff like Ender's Game, Speaker for the Dead, things like that, although it's debatable whether those two are even in the same subgenre. And some books you read that are young adult sci-fi tend to explain themselves. They explain facts and they explain the physics behind why the big what if machine, why it works and why it doesn't. And then other ones just breeze right over it, And for those who aren't totally aware of the difference between hard and soft sci-fi, it's the same difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. They're both fine in their own right, but one is space wizards and the other one is, engineers and, taking 10 minutes to get a warp drive started versus Han Solo hitting a button and just going. So, and I hate to name drop a book, but there is one that just always comes to mind, and it's The Maze Runner. And you read The Maze Runner, which I did, and there's parts of it where they just sort of breeze over logic, and you're just kind of, it's just implied that you're just supposed to go with it. And you see that a lot now. You see that a lot with modern day young adult sci-fi because it's for kids, right? It's for teenagers. It's for 14, 15, 16-year-olds. So they don't feel like they have to explain as much. And that's a philosophy to have, I guess, but I just wholeheartedly disagree with it. I think that kids deserve more credit. And, if you're going to look at The Hobbit, The Hobbit's not science fiction, it's fantasy, but look at the style in which it's written. Look at the diction he uses. It's, by today's standards, that would be for an adult, and you get that with older books, people didn't talk down to kids. And I think that kids deserve more credit. I think they're intelligent people. They're just smaller than us with less life experience, but they understand. And, people used to criticize Orson Scott Card for the way that he wrote Ender's Game and the way that he portrayed those kids and their geniuses in the book, but he would say that a kid doesn't know that they're a kid. They view themselves like an adult. So, I just feel like you have to respect the person reading your book, and you have to look at them like they're your equal, and you have to talk to them, the way that they would want you to talk to them, and show respect for their perspective.
Do you think that's more of an author's choice, or do you think that's more of the publisher's choice for, main published authors?
Well, it depends, really, because at the end of the day, it's the hook that's going to get the publisher on board. So, The Maze Runner was chosen by a publisher because it was about kids in a maze, and that was appealing, and that's the hook. So, same thing with The Hunger Games, Ender's Game, all these books. They have a very intriguing hook, and they're about teenagers. The style in which it's written, there are styles on both sides, so I don't necessarily think that it comes down to the publisher. I'm sure they have a small hand in it, but I definitely think the author is more responsible because, these people, there's people on both sides. So it's not the industry that's fighting it as a whole because hard sci-fi young adult books are getting made. So I would put the blame more on the writer. And some of them have come out and said that, well, the science doesn't matter because this is for kids. So, they've openly, they've dealt with the criticism and they've just said, well, they shrug it off like it's not a big deal.
Right. Which it seems kind of weird because it seems, I would almost venture to say that there might be more adults reading YA than maybe kids.
Yeah, no, that's accurate.
Yeah.
Well, I know plenty of people that read YA sci-fi, and they're 40, 35 years old.
Right, exactly. So as you said, you have you have 3 books out there. 2 of them are in a series, your Variant Saga. The other one is a standalone. Why don't you tell them about the Variant Saga and where your idea for that came from?
Oh man, that's always a really hard question to answer. it's not really, I guess it's not really it's not one idea, it's a series of ideas that just sort of happened along the way. And when I was growing up, I played a lot of video games, and I feel like this is going to be a more complex answer than what you were expecting. But when I was a kid, I didn't read really at all, and that's, I guess, because of the region that I grew up in, and the fact that none of my friends read. So I spent a lot of time playing video games, and the games that I played were more like, they were RPGs, they were games like, they were story-driven games, and some of them required a lot of reading. So I'd play like Final Fantasy, I'd play Fallout, things like that. And when I was a teenager, Fallout 3 came out, and I played that for probably 120 hours or something like that. It was insane. I played all the downloadable content, all that stuff. And, I got really into that idea of a post-apocalyptic world. I got really into the idea of being trapped underground in a city and then coming out into this world that's just so far removed, an alien, but it's on Earth. And I think that just sat with me for years. So when it came time, and I was working at Verizon at the time, and I sat down, and I would always try to come up with short stories and things like that. I was working at my desk, and I was alone in the office, and I was like, I'm going to start writing something. And I just graduated with my degree, and I was like, I should probably start using this thing. So I started to write a little short story, and the first line of it was, today was Terry's birthday, and he was turning 7, and it was going to be all about this kid's awful birthday where all these horrible things happen to him, and it's just one big disaster after the next. And then I was going to book in the story with, today was Terry's birthday, and he was turning 7. And it's just something I was just kind of throwing together for fun. But as I started to write it, I was like, what if I put him in this underground city, at the end of the first page? So the whole thing drastically changed within 20 minutes. and then I was like, oh, well, what if I did this? And what if I did this? And what if I had, how would the society operate? And how would, what if he doesn't have a dad? What if it's just he just has a mom? And, but why would that happen? And what if it's what if you take the role of the mother and you make it into an occupation because they live in this small environment, this city of 10,000 people where population growth is a huge concern, and the gene pool has to be regulated, and what would happen as far as the branches of government goes, how would that work? And then I finally, I had built up this little world after a week or two, and then I got stuck because I was like, why are they underground in the first place? Because by that point I had said, oh, well, eventually, you'll visit the surface and you'll see what's up there and everything like that, and it'll be really cool. And you'll have these alien animals almost and things like that, and all these dangers, but that's all world building. You have to have a story. So I was like, why are they going up there, and why can't normal people go up there? Why do they have to be genetically engineered? Why is this kid allowed to go up but the others can't? And so I had to start thinking about it, and I couldn't come up with an answer for the longest time. Eventually I figured out the variant gas and everything like that. And I remember the moment that it happened too. I was driving to work and thinking about it all morning. In the shower, and then I was driving, and then as I pulled into the mall parking lot, because that's where the store was that I worked, as I pulled in and I parked, that's when it hit me, and it was the only moment in my entire life that I can actually say I had an epiphany. And a lot of people throw that word around, but I legitimately had one right as I pulled in, and I stopped, and the car was still going, and I just sort of tilted my head, and I was like, holy crap, that's the answer. And then I for a few moments I tied it into everything else in the story to see if it worked, and it did. And I'd been studying genetics a little bit, trying to like figure all this out, and the epiphany was like basically how the gas would work and how it would invade the cells and how it would change the genes of the organism it was invading to be more like itself. And in the process, it would kill the host 99% of the time, including pretty much all humans. So the goal by the original Doctor, Dr. Archer, was to make it so that that didn't happen. And to do that, he sort of had to genetically engineer these embryos, and that's what Terry is. So, all that sort of just came together all at once, and I was like really excited about it, and I ran into work and I immediately started working on it. Like before the store even opened, I was sitting at my computer like writing all this down, and I got super excited about it. And then I just spent the next like 4 years, because I joined the military not too long after that, and I just spent the next 4 or 5 years just working on this book and building the world. And I'd put it off to the side for a couple months here and there, and then I'd come back to it. And then when I started my master's degree, it was part of the program that you had to write a thesis, and the thesis was a book. So the Amber Project ended up being my thesis for my master's degree.
That's awesome. So, I know the series is called the Variant Saga. How many books do you have planned, since it's not called the trilogy or anything? How many books do you think you're going to end up writing in that saga?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, Preston, because I have yet to tell anybody this, but I'll just go ahead and say it now. I have 4 books planned, but I also have a spin-off book planned, which... spin-off books never really sell that well, but it's more of a passion thing. Same thing with standalones. It's really hard to market those, but series always do really well. But I've always been really interested in the time gap between the first and the second book. So I want to explore that in a spin-off book focused on John. And I've got a lot of really cool ideas that I want to put in there, and I think people will really like it. People that are passionate about the story, I think will get a lot of enjoyment out of that. So I guess you could say 5 books altogether, but really 4 for the main series. I can't really see it going beyond that. But as you'll find out in book 3, the world is so complex and diverse and big that it could probably just go on forever. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So how long did it take from when you initially got the idea to when you published the Amber Project? How long was the time frame for that?
Between when I got the idea?
Yeah, from when you started the book to when you actually published it. How long was that?
Oh, it was about 5 years, I think.
Oh, was it really? Yeah. So, did you have to do a lot of planning, or did you end up kind of writing on the seat of your pants most of the time for that book?
So, when I started, I was free writing the whole thing, and I guess everybody calls it pantsing, but I've just always called it free writing. And it was a huge mistake. I do not suggest doing that if you're a new writer. I strongly advise you to plan everything that you do, because there's a structure. There's a thing called story structure, and if you don't have that, then when you go back to revise, you're going to make it. So in order to make a proper story structure where certain parts don't feel rushed, or they don't drag on, to avoid all that, you will have to make sure that certain beats are in place in your book. And when I went back over that book, first I'd sent it off to people. I'd sent it off to S.M. Boyce and my friend Rob and a couple other people. And I tended to get the same response, which was that the second half of this book is amazing, but the first half, nothing really happens until they get to the chamber. And I reread it again, and I was like, man, that's true. So I ended up reading a couple books on story structure and going back and re-editing it. And basically, I deleted 10,000 words out of it and just changed the overall structure and rewrote certain parts of it. It took like a month and a half. But when I sent it back out, everybody loved it, and they were like, "This is so much better. What did you do?" But all I did was I moved the chamber section up to the 25% mark, and deleted some excess scenes that didn't really need to be there and stuff like that. And that was all. Like, I wouldn't have had to do that if I had just planned everything out. And so with the second book, I planned it all out from the get-go, and I planned the third book out that I'm writing right now. And it has saved me, countless hours of work. That first book I sunk so much time into, and it's longer than the other books, and it's it's the first book in the series, so you've got to build the world up, and introduce the characters. But in hindsight, I could have saved so much time just by planning the whole thing out.
So I like to end the podcast, for those who haven't listened, on kind of not so serious ending, and it's called The Legendary Ending. So we're just going to kind of jump into these questions. What songs are currently on your writing playlist?
Oh, geez. I mostly listen to, like, classical orchestrated music, stuff like that, video game music. I listen to piano and violin. I have some, like, action-y, fantasy kind of music. So it really depends.
Right.
Movie soundtracks, stuff like that. I don't really do well with songs that have lyrics in them. I know I'm weird like that. That's more music that I listen to when I'm cleaning the house or, like, driving around.
Sounds good. If you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse with one of your book characters, which one would you want to be stuck with?
Oh, man. A zombie apocalypse? I guess I would have to go with one of the Variant kids. Probably John. Yeah, probably John.
John? Why John?
Because he's like 6'3", and he's like he looks like Channing Tatum with a gun, with a rifle. So like built and a natural soldier.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I want somebody like that who can clear a room, and like I can just hang back while he's taking care of business.
That's hilarious. Now, if you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse with any character from any media source, comics, books, movies, games, whichever, what character would you want?
Oh, obviously Superman.
Superman? Why Superman?
I mean, he could just melt everything. And then, like, they can't bite him, because his skin is impenetrable. So, I mean, it's like walking around with, like, a tank.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
If you had a time machine, where would you travel and why?
I would travel into the future because the past is boring and we already know what happened. But I'm really interested to know, like, what's going to happen next. And, if you took someone from the 1700s and you brought them into the modern day, they would probably have a heart attack from shock. And now they're saying that, before the 1700s, you didn't get that sort of leap in technology. You'd have to go back like a couple thousand years to get that again. But they're saying in the future, those massive leaps in technology are going to start coming like every 20 years, every 30 years, and then quickly get faster. So we're going to be seeing technological revolutions every 5 to 10 years, maybe less. So I'm interested to know where we're going to be in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. Are we going to be, still on Earth, but with bigger and better TVs, with virtual reality? Are we going to be in the Matrix? Because that seems to be sort of the direction that our culture is heading, where we're getting more and more absorbed into entertainment. VR is becoming a thing. PlayStation VR, you can get all this stuff now. 3D, it's all about immersion. So I'm curious if that's just going to be the direction we head, where let's get as much entertainment, let's get into the worlds that we create as much as possible, or are we going to be more interested in actual exploration of the universe? Are we going to find ourselves, exploring Venus in 100 years, or possibly another star system? Are we going to go to Titan and, search the soil for microbes? Are we going to go to Europa and see what's there? Are we going to go to the Andromeda Galaxy in 500 years? Like, that's what I would like to see. I think that's way more interesting than going backwards. But I appreciate people that would want to do that because, I'd love to be a fly on. I'm a huge American history buff, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall in at the Continental Congresses and see what it was like what those guys were actually like in real life, like Thomas Jefferson, who is said to be a very odd person, but no one ever goes into much detail about that. I'd love to see what he's actually like. Like, he dressed really uncommonly, and now people are beginning to think that maybe he was autistic. So yeah, I'd love to see what these people were like, and I'd like to go back to ancient Egypt and watch the pyramids get built, things like that. But if I could only do one, I would definitely go into the future, a couple hundred years, and see what's happened to humanity. Like, are we all walking around with chips in our heads to quicken our brain power? Because now they're saying that's a possibility. Are we gonna have mechanical bodies at some point because ours are so imperfect? Like, what's going to happen? We could literally go in 1,000 directions. So it'll be interesting to see where humans go and how we self-evolve.
So, and for the famous final question, a penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say, and why is he here?
Well, he sounds drunk, so I'm going to say he's looking for more booze.
There we go. So before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone out there who just doesn't, they're a writer in the sense that they write, but they haven't published, and they want to. They're an aspiring writer, I guess, or an aspiring novelist. I remember the biggest thing for me was kicking the can down the road and saying, eventually I'll get there, eventually I'll write this book. And it seems like it's this big project, like it's so hard to do, and it's going to take forever, and you never know if you're going to be able to get past that roadblock or that threshold. But if you just do it and you put it out there and you move on to the next one becomes so much easier. If I could go back in time and tell myself, to just write the damn thing, I'd be a lot further ahead than I am now. I don't have any regrets in that sense, but I do think people put too much pressure on themselves when it's their first book, and I think that's natural, but you just got to write it and you got to get it out there, and everything else will fall into place.
Sounds good. Where can listeners go if they want to find out more about you or your books?
So, jandchaney.com. You can get news on my latest releases. You can get signed paperbacks on there. I also run the Indie Pub podcast with another author, SN Boyce, and that's specifically for writers. But we have writers on there. We've had Heather Hildebrand a couple different times. We've had Sarah Nofke was on there. David Estes, people like that. So, and we talk about the craft, we talk about publishing, we talk about traditional and independent and all that stuff. So if you're a writer and you're interested in that kind of thing, you can find that on my website too.
Sounds good. Well, I'll put links in the notes for people to go and check those out if they would like to. So thank you for joining us today for this episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Well, guys, that's our time. Thank you for joining us for 30-Minute Author Interviews. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and please leave a review. It really helps out. And until next time, guys, stay legendary. Oh, screwed that one up. Blooper reel.